in the not-too-distant future, following the rapid succession of World Wars III and IV, plus the hidden horrors of secret World War II. There's not much left. All that remains is a place where folks get together to read and discuss comic books. Sometimes they laugh, sometimes they argue, but they always record and upload their transmissions. You've found one of those transmissions today. Welcome to The Last Comic Shop.
People often ask me how the world ended, whether it was with a bang or with a whimper. And all I can say is, first they came for the drive-ins, and nobody said anything.
Next, they took the arcades, and still, folks stayed silent.
Then it was the video rental establishments, the record shops, and the toy stores. And still, they said nothing. By the time they got to the local comic book shops, there were no nerds left to say anything.
Except for us! We're the last comic shop, raging against the dying of the light, sending our broadcasts back into the days of futures past, in hopes that our comic book reviews might alter this cold, gray reality in which comic shops are nothing but a long forgotten memory.
So heed our words and go to your local comic shop. Pick up either the book we'll be reviewing today or any number of countless comic book treasures before it's too late. And I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson, and welcome back to another week of The Last Comic Shop. Thank you for tuning in to our broadcast. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Smith. So, Chad, we just spent about 2 minutes going over what The Last Comic Shop is. But for those folks that have just listened to our podcast for the first time, what is The Last Comic Shop?
I bet they're still listening to it for the first time. Anyway, let me expose the gimmick a little bit here. See, the thing is, kids, is we like to talk about comic books. And so the thought process is, even if everything else went away, we would still be hanging around talking about comic books. And so that's what this show is. And this is for those folks out there that maybe you don't have people locally that you talk comics with. Maybe you just want to hear some differing opinions. Maybe you just want to be around that comic aura. Especially the crazy world we're living in now, where a lot of those things like conventions and those other outlets have been a little bit dissipated. We want to help fill that void, as well as expose you to some of the stuff that we think is really great. Like, ultimately, our goal is to bring people into the tent. You know, whether it's the movies that are getting people excited about comic book properties, we still want people to be able to find things that are accessible and neat. And so, sure, we have a post-apocalyptic background setting, but really, it's at the end of the day, it's all about comics and spreading the love and having fun with it.
Absolutely. As I always say, we don't hide our strings here on The Last Comic Shop. You'll see them, and we hope that you'll enjoy this ride. Now, my other co-host, as always on this program, is J.A. Scott. J.A., will we be doing more than just comics on this program, or are you about to burst somebody's bubble?
Well, it will be mostly comics. The bread and butter of this show is going to be comic books. Week in and week out, we're going to look at one series or one topic comic book and discuss it. That being said, there will be some occasional one-offs that we just sprinkle in here and there when we feel the need. Should a property arise, maybe a comic book related movie or something in pop culture that's kind of comics adjacent. But as Chad said, we want to talk comic books. We want people to come into the tent, and we're also all about reading.
Absolutely. Because where would comic books be if you actually didn't have comic books? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody's excited about all these comic-related movies and television shows and cartoon programs and all that, and the comic-related culture, which is just, I don't know, from when I was a young kid, you know, and growing up in the 80s and 90s, like, to see somebody else wearing a comic book t-shirt back in the day, you were like, oh my God, like, that guy has to be instantly my friend. because like nobody wears this stuff except for our little group. But now our little group has gotten to be so big. There's so many people that are into comic book culture, whether they know it or not. Those folks that are on the fringes, those folks that are saying, hey, I love the comic book movies, but I think some of these comic books, they're impenetrable. Like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to read. We'll give you things that you can read. You can go to your local comic book shop and pick up this week. Now, to make a liar out of my cousin immediately, for the first segment on today's program, we're actually going to be talking about a comic book related property. We're going to be covering a book on today's program, the Vision series by Tom King. It was released a couple years ago. But the reason why we're mainly doing it is because in the upcoming days, we've actually finally got the premiere of WandaVision, the first of the Marvel Cinematic television programs that'll be debuting on Disney+. These were supposed to come out, I think, as early as last year. If everything had gone the way that it was supposed to, I think Falcon Winter Soldier program was supposed to be the first one, but they've now shuffled the cards a little bit, and WandaVision kicks off this series of programs. It's an issue, or
well, before you get going too far, but I just want to interrupt because that's what I like doing. It's important to note that this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe TV shows. So this is a whole different bag than a lot of the Marvel shows you've experienced before.
Yeah.
So if you watch shows on Freeform or the Netflix shows like the excellent Daredevil show or Jessica Jones, or even like ABC's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., those were all done under a different umbrella. And sure, they're like, yeah, it's all connected, it all counts. Not really. And so now the people that make the movies have been given free rein to make the shows. And so they're basically making, 6-hour movies, and breaking them up into installments for you.
yeah, and so for those folks that follow the MCU, really WandaVision will be the start of Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it stars Elizabeth Olsen as the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff.
No longer speaking with a Russian accent. That's gone.
Yeah, they just kind of dumped that
out throughout. So
let's get the brass tacks here. She's, but also, of course, Paul Bettany.
Bettany is how I say.
Bethany.
Yes, as the Vision, one of my all-time favorite comic book characters. And as some people might remember from Infinity War, he died. He died and he did not come back in Endgame. So the fact that the Vision is in this series already should be making you scratch your forehead a little bit and say, well, how is he allowed to be in here? I thought he died.
And I'm glad you brought that point up because I forgot, because I don't give a crap about the Vision. That'll come up later. Carry on.
Well, in any case, the reason why they've said that this is going to be starting off Phase 4 is primarily because the prevailing theory about this series is that it's going to shake up the multiverse at Marvel. You may have heard that there's rumors out there that Spider-Man, the new one with Tom Holland, will be a crossover with folks from other parts of the Spider-Man franchise. Tobey Maguire's coming back. Andrew Garfield's coming back. Alfred Molina's coming back. Emma Stone is coming back as Gwen Stacy, and Kirsten Dunst, and all the folks from all the other Spider-Man movies. And the notion is that they're coming back because, again, this is going to be touching upon the fact that comic books exist in multiverses. They do. They have alternate realities in which the same comic book character can exist in different forms in different realities. This is a primary way of how we get things like the What If series that is so popular at Marvel. It's because from about the mid-'70s when Alan Moore was like, yep, I'm going to put this in a Captain Britain book, there's the idea of multiverses at Marvel.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I like the idea. It's a storytelling trope. It allows you to expand outside of maybe your universe's comfort zone. It brings in that level of the unknown and danger and risk, and it also helps writers who have written themselves into corners get out of those corners very easily. Watching the latest series of Star Trek Discovery, and that has a big element of the mirror universe with the Terran Empire, and that plays a big part of this.
And all the
this past
goatees.
season. Yes, the goatees. You know you're evil if you have a goatee. And it's probably getting to more of the comic-centric Wanda, who is, a hot mess of a mental character.
It's true.
So that's what she should be, and turns out to be this kind of badass with this power set that kind of just morphs and evolves as the writers need it to. But with the exception of maybe the Age of Ultron movie, you don't really ever see her dealing with sort of the craziness that is her head. That's what makes her an interesting comic book character. It's the craziness in her head that makes this super badass power set dangerous.
And I just wanted to chime in, too. One of the things about the multiverses, and this goes back in comic books, like all the way back to the two Flashes. That amazing cover with Jay Garrick and Barry Allen racing. This is a way to reset. This is a way to do those soft reboots. And especially when you're dealing with things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's been around for a decade. A lot of those actors have aged out of those roles. A lot of those people, it's time for a soft reset. And so, okay, let's play with the multiverse. Marvel and DC are both going at it at the same time. We'll see who does it better.
Yeah, I agree also that it's a way for Marvel to kind of take, Disney, I guess, to take some shortcuts with their Marvel Cinematic Universe in incorporating some of the past movies that used to belong to Fox. I mean, if you want to bring in the X-Men, if you want to bring in the Fantastic Four, if you want to make those movies quote unquote count, then adding the multiverse dimension basically allows you to do that, because you can just simply say, yeah, that may have been the version of the Fantastic Four in this other place, but now we've got this other Fantastic Four, but those movies still count because they happened in one of the other multiverses. But to J.A.'s point, one of the most interesting parts of the Scarlet Witch has always been the fact that she's batshit crazy. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it really is kind of like a House of M kind of moment in which she's going to kind of shuffle the cards a little bit and allow some creativity to take hold within the MCU and some different ideas to come up without feeling so hedge-pinned in to this long-standing decades continuity. But in any case, we're not here to talk about WandaVision. We're here to talk about The Vision by Tom King, and we'll be right back with more of The Last Comic Shop right after these messages, so stay tuned.
It was the three-legged dog of comics.
It was bad.
These two gentlemen met in jail, and then when they got out, they started publishing.
It should have been mobsters instead of doing what they do in comics.
Management there was questionable at times.
Some of it has to do with people who go to jail.
We are sinners. We have corrupted the youth. Stuff that should never have been sold to kids.
And then there was Charlton. I couldn't quite tell what they were doing.
Charlton was just a hodgepodge of weird titles.
What is this? Who am I dealing with?
John threw nickels around like they were manhole covers.
CATAP. They were cheap.
Hell yes, they're cheap.
They were a special kind of special is what they were.
Critic was horrible.
You could smell them beginning to decay even as they were rolling off the press.
At one point, they actually did have to move the comics operation into a bowling alley.
It's something out of a sitcom.
We want to publish comic books in the worst way, and they did.
It's been called the street-fighting cousin of Marvel and DC. Maybe you've heard of them. Probably not. But you do know the industry legends that called it home. This is Charlton Comics. Follow at charltonmovie.com.
Oh, it's gonna suck.
All right, and we are back with more of The Last Comic Shop. And on today's program, we're going to be reviewing, I got to say, it's one of my favorite books of the last 10 years, I've got to say. Not only because it's got one of my favorite characters in all of comic books, in The Vision, but just because when I think of prestige series that have an outside of continuity, they put them out in single issues, then they put them in the graphic trade, and then you get the definitive edition and whatever. I just can't get enough of it. It is Tom King's Vision. And although I've said Tom King's Vision so many times so far, Chad, who did Tom King's Vision?
Tom King is not an island unto himself. So Tom King, this originally, as you've said, was a 12-issue series. Tom King wrote it. You had Gabriel Hernandez Walta handling the lion's share of the art chores, with Michael Walsh stepping in for issue number 7. You had Jordi Belair on colors, Clayton Cowles on letters, And really, it really was Tom King's second best series next to Mr. Miracle #1.
No. You don't get Mr. Miracle unless he has the Vision. I will fight you to the end of time on that, sir. But you didn't mention one of the best parts about this book is the fantastic Mike Del Mundo covers. Like, those covers are just excellent. I love Mike Del Mundo as an artist. I've loved him ever since he put out Weird World in the Secret Wars series. Mike Del Mundo is probably in my top 10 recent favorite artists, in the last 25 years. Like, I really love Mike Del Mundo's stuff. And so his covers are just terrific, whether it's the Vision family playing Twister on one of them as like a Christmas, I don't know if it's a Christmas card or whatever, but it's great. There's the one of their dog Sparky catching a Frisbee in the air.
Yeah. And they look so normal. Like the mailbox one, I didn't recognize the mailbox was a floating mailbox. It's clearly there on the cover. And it's really freaky when you think about it, but it looks so normal. You just didn't see the place underneath.
I mean, my personal favorite is the family tree cover. Till the end of time, the idea of the family tree cover, where you have Henry Pym right at the top, and then it goes down to Ultron and Victor and the Vision, and then you have Wonder Man and even the Grim Reaper and Scarlet Witch and Wiccan. It's just gorgeous, and I'm glad that they use that. You can get this in trade. And they call it the definitive edition. But they use that as the cover. And I just think that is the most interesting way to visually interpret what you're doing with this particular series that could be done. So I kudos to whoever said, yeah, let's do a family tree cover. That sounds neat. Anyways, here is your 10-cent synopsis for The Vision by Tom King. Basically, the Vision decides to settle down in this series. After years of being a synthesoid member of the Avengers, he's gotten a cushy job basically in Washington, D.C., and he decides to settle down in the suburbs and make himself a robot family. A wife named Virginia, a son named Vin, and a daughter named Viv. And eventually a dog named Sparky. And ultimately, his dream of having that idyllic suburban life comes crashing down around him, basically due to the efforts of his wife, who just starts having a lot of human-like foibles, like she ends up killing the Grim Reaper and then tries to cover that up, and then tries to cover up killing up some other guy or putting him into a coma, and then he has to lie to the police, and they have to cover the bodies, and it's just weird. By the end of the book, the Vision trying to kill the rest of the Avengers because his son died, and his wife takes the fall for him.
Vision gets lonely, makes a family, messes up, stuff goes wrong, people die.
The end.
There you go. It touches upon so many things, like this notion of being the outsider and coming into an environment where, you're seen as the outsider, to kind of just the notion of being the minority. The Vision comes into this white, yuppie, suburban environment, and people are like, well, we're bringing him brownies or whatever, but do even robots eat? It's just so interesting for me, but I've done a lot of talking. I want to start off with Chad Smith as to what he thought of The Vision. Now, this is not the first time that you've read it. You read it several years ago, back when it first came out, right, Chad?
Oh, yeah, and so I've read this in issues. It's also one of those books that I picked up the trades, and I regret I picked up the initial trades and they didn't hold out for the definitive edition that has it all in one. But yeah, this is an experience for sure. And with Tom King, I think he's an interesting writer. I know there are lots of folks out there that his name can be a little bit divisive with what he's trying to do. But I honestly thought this experience was actually better in the issues than it was in the two trades, simply because it had the letter columns and all that stuff that you sort of miss out on. I don't know if they made the cut in the definitive editions. But this story is all about not fitting in. And so the Vision, he wants to fit in. He has that desire to fit in. He wants that element of normalcy. And then, he builds his family, and his wife makes a poor decision. And it's funny because the Vision is constantly kind of like chiding her along the way, like, no, this is why people do things. This is why people say something is, we don't say it's nice. We say it's sweet or something. Like, he's constantly doing that. But Virginia, on the other hand, she keeps making these bad decisions, then doubling down and making more bad decisions. And before you know it, she has killed a couple of people. She has destroyed the cookie pan that the neighbors brought over. How cool was that scene when the neighbors come over to the house and the house is just a wreck? Like, totally just everything is broken and destroyed, and she pulls out this broken cookie sheet. She's like, oh, here, I wanted to give this back to you. Sorry.
We're redecorating.
Are you putting in a pool?
Yes, we're putting in a pool. It was so great to watch these, these synthezoids try to fit in and try to be human, and sort of like they have this idea that they want to achieve, and they're achieving it by screwing up.
Yeah, there were some threads that they could have gone into in a lot more detail. I mean, the obvious sort of start off, I really like the issue with Vision and Scarlet Witch,
yes.
issue 7. To me, that was the linchpin of the whole series, and they didn't pull on that thread long enough, because the whole reason the wife was going nutso, she had the brainwaves of Scarlet Witch in her. And I thought that could have been explored a lot more. And then the whole idea that Vision's family creation that he made ended up killing all these people, all these innocent people, that was never addressed. Vision never had to pay for the deaths of all these people that were, he had blood on his hands from, I think, issue 2.
Yeah, you've got Grim Reapers, you've got crappy neighbors, you've got, what do you call it?
I mean, the neighbors who brought, you bring cookies over and then you die a horrible death because your house is forehead raised.
Yeah, but you've been spouting racist stuff off right at the doors. The neighbors are ready to open up.
That's an interesting take on karma for you. But, I had issues like the kid being killed. I understand why they did it, to help with Viv's sort of progression. But at the same time, I just also felt there wasn't enough weight put on it.
Really? There wasn't enough weight with the fact that his son dies, and then he decides he's going to just go kill all the Avengers. And then
No, not the Vision. I mean, CK, the human.
Oh, okay, yeah. You're right. I mean, the kid just kind of gets shot just as kind of collateral damage from...
Yes, there was a lot of collateral damage throughout the issues to get to that sort of core thing of the Vision going crazy to protect his family. But, okay, because he's the Vision and he has all these powers. What about everybody else whose sons died and whatnot? So, I don't know.
Yeah, but he was aggressive. He had ulterior motives.
Look, one thing that I know about you, J.A., is you've always enjoyed Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And one of the major points of that particular book, what's the line between being human and being, I guess, a robot? In this book, basically, Tom King tries to answer the question of, the Vision has been talking all this time about, being kind of separate, being a synthesoid, being an android. But, as you get to in issue 11, and one of the more powerful moments of this book, which, I mean, this entire series is filled with them. But when Scarlet Witch comes up to him and says, you know what, Vision, they don't get us. We're different from them. We're always different. And he's like, No, you never got me. I never wanted to be different. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to be like everybody else. This is a guy that just wanted to be human. He wanted to have a wife. He wanted to have kids. He wanted to settle down in the suburbs. He wanted people to leave him alone and just let him be a normal person. So my question to you, J.A., as somebody that enjoys good sci-fi like that, did you, appreciate at least Tom King taking a stab at this notion, the definition of being human?
I thought it was forced. I guess it's a bit of a trope lined up on top of trope. There's the superhero doesn't want to be the superhero anymore and just wants to live the normal life. But, you can't escape from the fact that you're a superhero. And then you've got, on top of that, you've got the robot who wants to be a human. What I found most unbelievable about the whole thing was fighting the Avengers and trying to avenge the death of his son by killing his brother, essentially. But what I felt was false about that was that you're taking everything that Vision has ever stood for throughout his entire career life within Marvel and just saying, none of that matters. Once his son died, he's going to go kill somebody.
Okay, can I butt in here? I think this exposes where you guys have gone wrong by assuming that issue with Wanda is the pivotal issue in the series, because it's not. I mean, that's fun, and you get the weird family dinner with the guy from the High Evolutionary and Pietro, like you get all that weird stuff, and that's cool, and you get to see Wanda, and she's crazy, and that's cool, and you get to see the weird convoluted machinations of their relationship with, Wonder Man and all that stuff. Yeah. All that stuff is fun. But the real secret to the sauce is actually in issue number 6. And it's, I've got a page here. It's page 20. This is after they introduced the dog, right? And so I'm just going to read some prose here. This was Vision's choice. The Reaper had come, and Vision had failed. He would continue to fail. Should he then continue? And then the dog walks in and makes his introduction to Viv, and, it's real sweet. The answer for Vision was yes, he would continue. He would fix what had been broken. He would hide what he could not fix. He would make his family. The easy explanation of his answer would be that he, who longed to be human, recognized that this was the human decision. That every day all men and women make the same choice, to go on, even though they cannot possibly go on. In truth, however, this was not his reasoning. In the end, Vision simply came to understand that he could not choose between family and practicality. Indeed, considering the situation, it was clear. He had no choice at all. And that's what it is, mother. Those choices we make that don't make sense, that we make anyway, because we have to go on. He's trying to be normal. He's not normal. He's never going to be normal. Guess what, kids? You're not going to be normal. Guess what else? That's okay. You have to embrace that. This is what happens as a result of you trying to shoehorn things in and force it. And he puts himself in those predicaments, and this synthezoid ends up with these very human problems that don't make sense. It's the conundrum of humanity. We don't make sense. We never will. It's okay.
And you're right that there are other parts in this particular series that kind of echo those particular sentiments. There's the one idea of the P versus NP, where you have problem, where you basically if you ask a computer to come up with the solution to a problem, it'll take a shortcut. That's why certain, maybe a math equation or something is easy for a computer to figure out because it takes a shortcut and it knows the answer. But if you ask it like something like, how do I live my life? Well, it's going to go through the infinite combinations of how to live one's life, and it will take them, a long, long time to come up with an answer. Eventually, it, I guess, will, but it just doesn't have the shortcut to get to very easily. And so it's the same thing here. Vision has decided that he doesn't want to be the computer. He doesn't want to be figuring out things in just terms of the shortcut. He wants to figure out things the long way. And unfortunately, the long way's hard. Again, it's really weird for me as a longtime fan of the Vision. So I know this is one of the things that Tom King does. Tom King likes to play with certain parts of continuity that matter to him, and other parts he just goes, meh, I'll just chuck that out the window for the sake of this series. He kind of sort of did that with Mr. Miracle, but they work because, again, these are prestigious, and he's just telling his story. I mean, you don't get this based on the Vision from the 70s with the Wonder Man brain patterns, which is why, again, issue 7 means so much. That's why I think it's the most pivotal series, because you have to understand the Vision's thought process through the years, how he went to becoming the White Vision in the 90s, where he lost all of his humanity, and
the white one with the feet who was really lame.
Yes.
I don't care about the Vision. Keep going.
People don't understand that the reason why we have White Vision is because he decided back in the 80s in a story called Ultimate Vision that he wanted to basically fix the planet. And so he took over all of the computers and tried to run them himself. After he was stopped, the government thought he was a threat and basically dismantled him. and then they rebuilt him as White Vision, and that's why he doesn't have the brain patterns anymore. And so what people don't understand is Vision's tried to do these things before. Like, he's tried to, like, fix things or tried to live a normal life or make things better, and he's failed before at the same point. So it is very human for him to go back to just, again, repeating the same mistakes he's made in the past. But
I was going to say, also, the White Vision was an homage to how they originally were going to make the Vision, but then couldn't because he wouldn't show up on the coloring of comic books at the time. So originally, when Vision was conceived at Marvel, they wanted it all white. But with the limitations of 4-color printing, they had to make him a color, so they made him all red.
I did not know that.
And then its costume evolved from there. So I think when they were able to make a comic book character all white, they did it as well as sort of an homage to this was the original concept design of the character. Nothing to do with the myth, the story, but I thought that was a nice little...
Yeah, no, it was. Issue 7 is kind of like a turning point in this series, because the first 6 issues are all about pretty much Virginia and like Virginia's failings as a person and leading up to the fact that Vision has to adopt this mentality of like, well, I'm going to protect my family at all costs. I guess that's what I'm going to do. And then the second half of the series after issue 7 is all about, they introduce Victor into the series, his brother. You know, he's spying on the Vision family and ends up killing the son accidentally.
And he's a drug addict.
Yeah, he's a junkie. He's a vibranium junkie.
He wants to be like his older brother in the Vision, yet he doesn't want to end up like his father, the Ultron, and trying to destroy the Avengers like he's foreseen in the future. There's a lot of future stuff going on here. But like, for me, the second half of the series is much more interesting. From the Scarlet Witch issue on, I think the series really does pick up and kind of starts, I don't know, rolling downhill. The eventual death of Virginia in the last issue. Yeah, you don't get all that without issue 7 has the best cover too. One of the best covers in all of comic books. The picture of Vision on the front, and you have these 3 Scarlet Witches from the different eras of Scarlet Witch, all like putting her hand inside of him, like that she owns him, because she does. She does. He never got over her. This is such a human thing. This was the girl that he never got over. So much so that he made a wife that was pretty much the Scarlet Witch.
Well, no, this whole book is the Vision becoming a human by becoming the worst. He's just the worst.
Agree. Maybe that's why I didn't like it. Also, I felt there was a big dichotomy sort of between the early issues where Vision is sort of like this kind of put upon character and, you know, stuff is starting to spiral out of control for him. And then the ending, he's like Liam Neeson. He has a very specialized skill set. He's going to kill anyone who messes with his family.
That's true. That's true. As a longtime fan of the Vision, the fact that he could take down all of the Avengers, I guess he has that power set, but they've never really said that.
I didn't buy that. I'm like, come on, that's just...
And his biggest failing is the fact that he doesn't learn. Darn it, he's part robot. He should learn. Yeah. The last page, he's starting all over again. He's the worst of humanity. He's the absolute worst. But in dichotomy with J.A., I believe humanity's the worst, so I'm okay with it. I really enjoy the series.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, Chad, because I remember when we first originally read this book when it was coming out in single issues, it kind of blew our mind a little bit because you were thinking to yourself, how could anybody really do a 12-issue series with a Vision and actually people, I guess, care? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, but I remember both of us were saying like, oh my gosh, they are recreating the Vision as some sort of Shakespearean tragedy. This is going to end up badly for him because he has hubris
because he is.
Yes.
Keep it Shakespearean there.
He is some of the worst aspects of humanity. Like, he's condescending. You know, I mean, I don't know how many times in the series you have to hear him say, I saved the world 37 times. When was the last time you heard Captain America say, I've saved the world 37 times? He's very proud of this, and rightfully so. But you don't say that as a superhero. You don't. You don't say it. You're like the Sheldon of superheroes. You just don't say it. So it's very weird that he's such a bad person, but I love this book so much.
He's so bad at being a person.
I mean, isn't that good drama? Isn't that a key part of a Shakespearean tragedy that, like, legitimately that the main character has to have flaws so pronounced that ultimately at the end of the day you can see their downfall from a mile away? Like,
I go back, and I don't do this a lot with comic books, but with the Tom King books, I really like his words. There's a page here at the end after Virginia has passed on, and, you know, Viv is talking to the Scarlet Witch, and it's like, Virginia did the right thing, or she did the wrong thing, or she did what everybody does. She saved what she could, and when she was done, she was done. And it's like, every time I go to that stuff, I'm like, okay, this is what life is. We try to do what we can, and then when our time is up, it's up, and it's somebody else's turn to do what they can. And sometimes we keep making these same cycle of mistakes, and sometimes we can break that cycle. Based on this book, I don't see Vision breaking that cycle anytime soon. Maybe Viv. There's hope for Viv. Who knows?
So I was going through and tallying up the body count. And the boyfriend killed by the dad trying to shoot Virginia. We've got the Grim Reaper killed by Virginia. Nora and George killed by Vin.
Those are just jerk bags.
Vin himself.
You got the junkie. Drugs are bad, okay?
Right. We've got Victor, killed by Virginia. We've got Virginia. Actually, hang on. Virginia does a lot of killing. She killed the Grim Reaper. She killed Victor. She killed herself. And then you could say that her actions caused the poor dog Zeke to die. So
hold on, wait. Vision's the guy that cut out the dog's brains and put him in a new dog. That's really weird. Nobody has a about that.
And by the way, probably the creepiest picture in the entire series when, like, Vision comes in the backyard and the dog's like charbroiled and he's like, "Rawr!" after he bites like the Grim Reaper's arm and he just like gets electrocuted and he's half burnt. I'm like, oh, that is not a pleasant picture. That is
brutal.
Charbroiled dog. Like, I don't want to see this.
Thank goodness you couldn't smell it. I praised the words a lot. The art in this book is fantastic. Gabriel Walta does such a great job with the emotions, and like you can see when Vision is just staring straight ahead and has that look that everyone's had in a meeting where it's like, no, you're the worst. I love that. I love the family dynamics. I love the false smiles when they open the door. Gabriel Walta, as great as Tom King is, Walta definitely pulls his weight as well.
Yeah, the art is tremendous in this book, and you know what? I think we're going to talk about that a little more in our grade rating section coming up right after these commercial breaks. So stay tuned to more of The Last Comic Shop right after these messages.
Are there real ghosts in Miss Pac-Man? Are satanic secrets hidden in your Excel spreadsheet? Did Pokemon cause a spike in suicides in Japan? Hello gamers, I'm Tim Gibson, host of the Cabinet Podcast. I look at the strange occurrences behind your favorite video games. A new weird creepy story drops every 2 weeks on Wednesdays. That's the Cabinet Podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and other major podcast platforms.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop.
Woo! Oh, wait, wrong show.
It's called a throwback now. Anyways, we are back with our ratings, whatever you want to call it on this particular program where we assign worth to a particular comic book. And as always, we like to do this on a 1 out of 4 scale. But not as always, we like to do that scale in a different way each week. So, J.A., what are we rating this book this week?
Okay, it is 1 out of 4 consumed Everbloom petals.
Ooh, you can see the future!
Yes, only if you've consumed one that's been consumed.
And so we'll start off with Chad Smith, as always. So, Chad, what are you rating the Vision this week in terms of Everbloom petals?
I'm not going to belabor this. 4 out of 4. The art is great. The story is great. It's one of those things that makes you question the world around you. The little bits of satire are awesome. I love it. I would recommend for those adult readers out there that are looking for something a little bit different.
Absolutely. Now, but you do say that Mr. Miracle is better?
Oh, yeah. It might be for me, possibly the themes are a little bit stronger or make more connection for me with Mr. Miracle. And if it's possible, I like the Mitch Gerard's art just slightly more. But there's no fault to be found with the Vision. Like, I'm not going to dig it for being not as good as that other thing that's even better. Whatever. My recommendation.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. We'll get to that. All right. So, J.A., what's your rating for the Vision this week?
Yeah, so I also really like the art, and storytelling was really well done. So that's a positive for it, I guess. As I said, I wasn't a big fan of the story arc. I thought some of the stuff got glossed over. Other bits didn't need to be done. And I felt that the central conceit of it, they never dealt with how, the Vision handled all of this, I felt. So I'm not going to be able to see the future because I'm only consuming the Everbloom petal once.
Wow, that's crazy. I could not disagree more. Obviously, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 4. This was my pick, by the way, and I really wanted to read the Vision again. If nothing else, just to read issue 7 one more time. I have read issue 7 like at least 10 to 15 times now. Issue 7 is by far one of the best individual single issues I've read in probably the last 25 years. I could easily say that. It was just, again, taking everything that I love about two of my favorite characters in Scarlet Witch and the Vision and kind of basically condensing it down into one issue, their entire story. This notion of her calling him the walking toaster. And it even has a joke.
Oh, it has your joke.
It does. For years and years and years, I told this joke about the talking muffin, and it ends with, holy shit, a talking muffin. And it's the same joke. It's the talking toasters. And it's like, well, holy crap, there's a talking toaster next to me.
But how awesome was it the Vision recycles that joke with both girlfriends?
That's so much in my opinion. He basically took brain patterns and said, no, I'm just building Scarlet Witch because she wants nothing to do with me. Which, by the way, if you read this book, Scarlet Witch is totally still into the Vision. Just saying that, shipping it forever. Scarlet Witch Vision, it's the wonderful, wonderful Marvel relationships that never should go away. They belong together, those two lovebirds, and so I'm so happy to see some of those, the last issue 12, where she says that stubborn, handsome father of yours, you can tell that they've still got a spark between them, which is good for comic books.
Now, I was going to ask, based off of J.A.'s point, he does bring up some valid points. After the end of this story, do you really still look at Vision as a hero? If this is in continuity, and you see the stuff he's doing, like, you've seen behind the curtain, and you see how messed up he really is, like, do you still consider a Vision a hero, or is he somebody that's just trying too hard to fit in?
I would consider him actually more of a hero now. Because I like my heroes to have a little bit of vulnerability to them, a little bit. They are fallible. That's a main reason why I'm not a huge fan of Superman.
I lose their marbles and try to murder their entire superhero group just so that they can avenge somebody, as opposed to letting the wheels of justice standing for right. So you're saying Vision can become the ultimate vigilante.
I'm saying that Vision is a much more interesting character now, thanks to the Vision series. I mean, you're talking about somebody that was, again, on the peripheral.
He's one hot minute from going ape crazy.
Yeah, you'd think the Avengers would address this before we have another Wanda Maximoff situation.
And no, I'm serious. He was always a very popular character on the Avengers, but he's kind of lost favor in the last 20 years. You went from a character that was basically, if you had the Avengers book in the 70s, he was the guy that had the corner picture. Like, the corner picture is important. Like, to have in the 70s, it was the Vision on the Avengers comic book. And so, like, he was a very, very popular character. 80s, not so much. 90s, not so much. 2000s, not so much. They even killed him in Avengers
500.
Dismantled.
Yeah, Bendis.
Yeah. They were like, yeah, screw him. Blew him up. Blow Scarlet Witch up. I don't care about these characters. So it's nice that Tom King was able to say, this is a really, really interesting character that you can tell really good stories with. Being an outsider among, a society that you're really trying so desperately to kind of fit in with. And I think that's universal. And I think that, again, Vision's struggles to be human and to fit in with the society in which he is honestly viewed as an outsider. It's something that we can all address. It's something we can all embrace. It's all something that we all have felt at some point in our lives. So I think this is universal. And I think it makes him a better hero, period. Is anybody going to fight with me?
Yes, I can see that. I could also think that they left some things on the table. I mean, what they missed was, Vision's rationality for a lot of this stuff smacks almost exactly like Ultron. So that angle was totally not brought up at all much or glossed over, if you want to be nice about it. I would say that they didn't even address it at all. I mean, that could probably be a whole series on itself. So you've got this compromised Vision. See him a lot of what he believes. Oh, thank you. A lot of what his with his family, what he believes his rationality is not that different from Ultron's rationality for killing humanity.
The shine is definitely off the Synthezoid for me, but I can appreciate your argument as well, Andy, where the flaws make him even more human.
Right. Does not fall far from the tree, and I think that's one thing that was brought up that we didn't touch upon in any sort of our initial thoughts is like the inevitability of things, how folks fight against the inevitability of things, like that people, I hate to say it, but there's like this notion that like everything is kind of pre-programmed, it's pre-thought out, that there's fate that steps in.
Nature versus nurture.
As much as people like Victor want to fight against the fact that they will become bad, they fight so hard against it that they become bad. Vision's the same way. He fights so hard to be normal that he's not normal. It's the things that you can't have that you desperately want, and you end up sabotaging your own efforts as a result of it. It's just tremendous stuff. I can't recommend this enough. In any case, it is now time for recommendations. It is now time for recommendations on our program where we give you other books other than Tom King's Vision that you can go out to your local comic book shop and pick up today. Now, as we do on this show, we always give you one book that is similar, one book that is current, and one book out of left field. All right, so on today's program, we've got Chad. He's going to give us our similar pick. So, Chad, what is our similar pick for this week?
So we have already alluded to this. I'm going to go with Mr. Miracle by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. I love this book. It starts off with a very depressed Mr. Miracle, and he's got some sort of PTSD going on, which we never got into the Tom King backstory, which is interesting. It's worth Googling. He used to work for the CIA and did some pretty covert stuff. But anyway, so in this book, it starts from a very low point, but as opposed to the Vision, which is all about the Vision trying to fit in and finding humanity by screwing up, in Mr. Miracle, it's all about this guy who's been screwing up, who finds his humanity by looking inward and letting those people in his life that he cares about carry him through. And so it's a really beautiful story. It's also another 12-issue maxi series that picks what continuity it wants and leaves other continuity aside. But I genuinely love it. I think Mr. Miracle, as good as the Vision is, I think Mr. Miracle is probably one of the best books I've read in the last 20 years. I think it belongs up there with your Dark Knight Returns and your Watchmen, and up in that upper echelon. It is that good, and I don't say that lightly.
Absolutely, and he's also got a similar color scheme to the Vision.
Yes, lots of reds and greens.
All reds and greens and yellows. So for my pick this week, I've got the current pick, and I'm going to go with Jason Aaron and R.M. Guerra's sequel to the original Goddamned series. It's called The Goddamned, I guess 2, if you want to call it. It's called The Virgin Brides. And for those people that might not know about this particular series, it's an Image series, and it is for folks that have basically ironclad stomachs. Because honestly, if you're any sort of good I hate to say it, Christian boy like I was, some of the stuff that happens in these particular series is in the goddamn, it's hard to stomach at times. It almost can seem almost blasphemous because simply put, the first goddamn series was all about, Adam's fallen son, Cain, and how he's immortal and walking the earth, and the time before the flood, and Noah is pretty much a slave master that's conquered all these people to build his glorious ark or whatever. And it's, again, a really dark take on some of those Old Testament stories. And the Virgin Brides just continues that particular notion with the idea of a throwaway line in the Bible about giants among men and how angels are basically procreating with human women. The most interesting part about that goddamn book is the fact that sometimes religious and political institutions can kind of brainwash particular individuals. Again, that cult mentality, where even though terrible things are happening to these characters in this book, they're going about it as if it's the part of normal society. They're like, yep, we're just going to be, sold off to angels to create demon babies, except for these two young girls that just like, no, we're bucking the system. This is not right. Just some weird, interesting stuff, but the artwork is tremendous. And if you can get, again, past how just icky it can sometimes feel, it is just really thought-provoking in terms of a comic book. It really expands your mind about what you can do with the comic medium and the kind of stories that you can tell with comics. So if you're up for it, check out both the original volume of The Goddamn, it ran for 5 issues, or the more recent issues of the Goddamned, The Virgin Brides. I can't recommend these books enough if you're somebody that wants to take a look at something different. Anyways, what's out of left field, J.A.?
So out of left field this week, we've got The Savage Sword of Conan, Wizards of the Black Circle. This was a story arc that ran from Savage Sword of Conan number 16 through issue 19 back in the 70s, with the script by Roy Thomas, art by John Buscema and Alfredo Alcala, the greats of the Conan series, adapted from an original story by Robert E. Howard. So you've got, you're hitting all the great marks. This has been collected in several different trades, but it's also out in the wonderful Savage Sword of Conan Omnibus 2. They've got 3 now. I think Omnibus 3 just came out. Savage Sword was the magazine version of Conan that Marvel was putting out. So these were slightly larger than a comic book size, and they were black and white, but they had these beautiful, beautiful painted covers and some really striking black and white artwork. Wizards of the Black Circle is renowned as being one of the greatest Robert E. Howard stories, Conan stories, and this is just a really wonderful representation. And if you get it in the omnibus, the way I've read it, the omnibus is nice that it combines everything from those issues together. So if you get it in trade, you're going to just get the straight story, and that's wonderful. But if you get the omnibus or you find the original issues, you're going to get the entire magazine as put out. So you get the letters, you get all the extra stuff they've packed into the magazine. So I highly recommend picking up the omnibus if you can, or the original magazines if you can find them at your local comic book stop. And if not, you can always find it in trade or on Comixology.
All right, and that was our recommendations for this week, and I hope that you enjoyed The Last Comic Shop. And make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on any of those fantastic podcatching platforms so that you never miss an episode in future, as well as follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Last Comic Shop so that you never miss any of our comic book musings. Plus, be on the lookout for a bonus episode this week. As our first week that we're putting out our particular podcast, we're going to have a bonus episode for you. We're going to be reviewing the Wonder Woman 84 comic book movie. that you can see on HBO Max, available right now. So if you have that streaming service and have watched that terrific movie or seen it, I guess, in the theaters, although most theaters are closed. Anyways, make sure that you tune in later this week for that special podcast.
And while we may be the last comic shop, chances are good you still have comic shops in your area. So if you're unawares, head to the comic shop locator at www.comicshoplocator.com. You can find something near you. There are a ton of great places out there. We really need folks to go out there and support those things so that we can still have comic shops to find all this cool stuff.
And until next week, I'm Andy Larson, and I was joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott. Everybody out there, stay safe, stay sheltered, and above all, make sure that your vision of the future includes really good comics, because ours definitely will.
It's a conflicted vision.
I got no strings to hold me down.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2021 Black Angus production.